In the time before time, when the earth still whispered the names of its creators and the sky had not yet been taught to forget, there was a land shaped by the will of gods and the sweat of mortals. It lay nestled between two serpentine rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, whose waters sang lullabies older than memory. The land was called Kiangur, Sumer, the black-headed people's domain. And it was there that history was not merely recorded, but invented. The sky stretched low and heavy over the reed-woven plains. The marshes exhaled their breath in thick veils of mist, curling around twisted fig trees and shattered ziggurats half swallowed by the soil. The stars above, uncounted and eternal, watched with silent knowing, blinking their 1,000 eyes through the dust. Even now, if you listen at dusk when the jackals fall silent, you might hear it. The wind carrying the lament of Inanna, or the bitter growl of Enlil's jealousy in a far-off thunderclap. Here, in this world both sacred and decaying, a house of clay stood alone at the edge of the steppe, its mud brick walls bearing carvings of beasts with 2 heads and suns with weeping eyes. This was not a house built by man. It was older than stone, older than kings, older, perhaps, than the idea of kingship itself. Within its shadow, time did not pass. Time collected, like rain in a cracked jar, like ash in the folds of a forgotten scroll. No one who entered the house remembered how long they had stayed, or what they had become. And in the center of this world, this great fertile crescent of dreams and dust, one figure stirred. A boy, not yet fully grown, sat at the river's edge, tracing spirals in the silt with a broken reed. His name was Tammuz, though he did not yet know it. He had not yet learned that names could bind a soul. He was a child of shepherds and starlight, raised on parables and silence, in a world where gods walked the earth disguised as wind or flame, and the difference between myth and memory was merely a matter of who spoke it aloud. But Tammuz felt it. The world was changing. The sun no longer rose with the same warmth it once did. The crops no longer whispered praise to the harvest goddess, but murmured warnings instead. There were rumors in the cities of men recording things, marking sounds into clay, scratching the language of the gods into tablets with bone-sharp styluses. These scribes, they said, could summon the past with their hands. They could make lies eternal. They could make truths disappear. And so, the winds shifted, and the gods grew restless. They say there was a night when the moon wept blood over the ziggurat of Uruk, and the high priestess of Inanna, veiled in silver and crowned with crescent horns, proclaimed a prophecy. A child shall walk between worlds, neither mortal nor divine, and he shall carve a path through time, not with a sword, but with a word. The scribes laughed, of course. Words had never moved mountains. Only swords could do that. But the old ones, the ones who still made offerings to the 7 who decree fate, they knew better. The invention of writing was not just a marvel. It was a threat. To speak was divine, but to write? To fix meaning into matter, to chain the breath of the gods into slabs of wet clay, that was heresy. That was power. In the house of the oracle, hidden deep beneath the city of Eridu where the canals ran red with silt, an ancient woman awoke from a dream older than her own bones. Her eyes, clouded with cataracts, saw stars when they should have seen darkness. She whispered only one word before the trance left her: Namtar. Death. But it was not the death of a body she had seen. It was the death of forgetting. For once history begins, memory becomes fossil. Oral truth becomes suspect. And the gods, once free to roam the stories of men, become pinned butterflies beneath the glass of eternity. And so it begins. In the sacred mud of Sumer, where myths were born not to be believed but to be lived, a quiet revolution was stirring. A shepherd's son, barely more than a shadow, would soon be caught in the jaws of forces far older than kings or temples. The gods were watching, the scribes were writing, and the clay was still soft. What would be remembered? What would be erased? And who would decide? Long before he heard the whisper of destiny in clay and river silt, Tammuz lived the quiet life of a shepherd's son. His days were measured by the bleating of lambs, the shifting patterns of clouds, and the slow arc of the sun across the sky. His family's small reed hut stood on the outskirts of the city of Larsa, where canals carved green veins through parched fields. Each dawn, Tammuz led his father's flock down a sun-cracked path, guiding them to pastures of tinder grass that sprouted beneath irrigation furrows. He was no stranger to hardship. His mother's hands, calloused and stained with ochre, rose before the dawn to bake barley loaves, while his younger sister Aisha learned the secrets of spinning wool on a simple spindle. Tammuz, meanwhile, learned to navigate by birdsong. When the waterfowl fell silent, he knew the river was low. When hawks circled high, a storm was coming. Yet, though his labors were modest, Tammuz's heart was restless. He felt, deep in his bones, that the world contained more than grazing fields and family love, that a hidden pattern pulsed beneath the surface of everyday life. At night, he would sneak from his straw mattress and lie by the arched reeds of the canal bank, where the murmur of water wove lullabies. He would stare at the stars, pinpricks of cold fire, and ask questions he could not speak aloud. Who are we beneath our names? What songs did the first men sing when the world was new? What keeps the gods from forgetting us? These questions had no answers in the fields or the marketplace. The elders of Larsa offered only proverbs. A man digs no deeper than the pit he stands in, they would say. But Tammuz's curiosity jutted like splintered reed into his chest. It was in the marketplace that he first glimpsed the power of the written word. A traveling caravan arrived one dawn, bearing fine lapis lazuli and copper ornaments. Among their wares was a small board carved with indecipherable signs, wedges and dashes set in hardened clay. A scribe, tall and austere, demonstrated how to press a reed stylus into clay to make marks. Tammuz watched, enthralled, as the scribe recited each symbol's meaning. Barley, sheep, count. Each mark was a thing unto itself, a vessel for a name, a promise, a debt. At that moment, Tammuz felt the world shudder. Words, things he'd always thought ephemeral, like smoke or song, could become as solid as the clay beneath his fingers. They could outlive memory, outlast flesh. They could make you immortal, or doom you to be forgotten forever. In the days that followed, Tammuz could think of little else. He lingered by the canals, tracing shapes in damp silt, trying to imitate the scribe's deft impressions. His fingers stung when cold water seeped into the cracks he made. His mother chastised him for muddying the side of the canal. "You'll catch the ague," she warned. But Tammuz only smiled, secretive and hungry for something more. One evening, as the twin moons of Dilmum rose like pale fire over the reeds, a messenger arrived at the shepherd's hut. He bore the seal of King Shulgi himself, an engraving of a star hovering above a stylized ziggurat. With nervous reverence, Tammuz's father broke the seal. The messenger unfurled a parchment, soft, unruly clay that could be smoothed again and again, and spoke in a measured voice. By decree of His Majesty Shulgi, this boy, Tammuz son of Dumuzi, is summoned to the palace of Uar. Tammuz's heart thundered. He was summoned to Uar, the city of 7 courts, of moon gods and exalted kings, of scribes whose wisdom shaped nations. His call was not for sheep tending, nor for barley threshing, but for something unseen. His father's eyes shimmered with pride and fear. "You will learn the language of signs," he whispered. "You will speak to gods in clay." His mother packed a simple bundle of bread, dates, and boiled lentils. Aisha touched his hand, wide-eyed, as though she, too, wondered at the strange path laid before her brother. That night, Tammuz lay awake in the hut's single corner, watching shadows drift beneath the oil lamp. His mind churned with possibility and dread. To leave Larsa was to leave all he'd ever known. His father's rough embrace, the smell of barley smoke, the mossy reed walls of his home. Yet something deeper stirred within him, the promise of discovery, the pull of destiny. He dreamt of the house of clay, of walls engraved with eyes that watched his every move. He dreamt of a voice, neither wholly male nor female, that whispered from the darkness. "The past is a river you cannot dam, but you may guide its course. Come and carve your name upon its banks." At dawn, before he could second-guess himself, Tammuz gathered his few belongings, a reed pen carved by his own hand, a handful of clay carved smooth, and set off for Uar. The journey to Uar took 3 days, each step drawing him closer to a world both magnificent and forbidding. He passed by travelers who bowed at the sight of the city's towering white ziggurat, the sacred Ikur of Enlil, and caravans that brought incense and precious stones. The air grew thick with the scent of date gardens and molten copper. The horizon was broken only by mud brick walls crowned with crenellations. When Tammuz finally entered the court of King Shulgi, he was led through colonnades carved with lotus blooms and past priests whose bronzed masks gleamed in the torchlight. The king himself sat on a dais of black diorite, draped in robes dyed with kermes and trimmed with gold thread. His scepter bore the shape of a crescent moon. Shulgi's eyes, though aged, shone with startling clarity. "What do you know of writing?" the king asked, voice low but commanding. Tammuz swallowed. "Only that it can bind a man's name beyond death, my lord." Shulgi inclined his head, as though satisfied. "Good. You shall study in the House of Tablets. There, you will labor with the clay and the stylus until the signs flow from your hand as easily as breath." From that moment, Tammuz's life became devoted to the memorization of wedge forms, the repetition of syllables, the geometry of signs. The House of Tablets was a labyrinth of low benches and clay-covered floors. Elder scribes moved among the students, murmuring corrections, praising precision, condemning sloppiness. Tammuz rose before dawn, chanting sign lists as the moon waned. He slept under the soft glare of oil lamps, nightmares of smashed tablets and broken styluses haunting his dreams. Yet each mark he pressed into clay was a triumph. The sign for life, the sign for water, the sign for gods. Each carried a weight that seemed to resonate in his pulse. With every stroke of the stylus, he awoke to a profound realization. Language itself was an instrument of creation and destruction. A single wedge could bless a harvest or curse it. It could immortalize a love or condemn a lover to oblivion. Among Tammuz's few possessions in Uar was a small amuletic tablet, gifted by his tutor Nindinger, a stern woman whose reputation for fairness was matched only by her lingering sadness. The tablet was no larger than a palm, etched with the sign for protection and bound with a thin strip of lapis lazuli twine. Legend held that it once belonged to Uarnemu, the first king to codify laws. Nindinger pressed the tablet into Tammuz's hand one evening. "Never let it leave your sight," she warned. "It will remind you of your purpose, to serve humanity by making contracts between gods and men." Tammuz kept the tablet beneath his tunic, its cold weight a talisman against doubt. He also found an ally in Anitu, a spirited apprentice scribe no older than himself. Where Tammuz was contemplative, Anitu brimmed with restless energy. She had dark eyes that missed nothing, and a laugh that rang like temple bells. Together they practiced tablet molding by moonlight, exchanged riddles in cuneiform, and shared scraps of gossip from the palace. Rumors of a secret sect of priests who sought to suppress writing, fearing its unnatural chains. Anitu once confided in Tammuz. "They say that when words grow too powerful, the earth itself will rebel. Fissures will split the ziggurats, and clay will crack under the weight of truth." Tammuz shivered at the thought. He had seen cracks forming in the world, dried riverbeds, cracked midday hells, children scratching symbols in the dust. Yet somehow, he believed that words could heal those cracks as well. Even as he mastered the signs, a deeper conflict roiled within Tammuz. Every day, he witnessed the power of the written word. Decrees that raised taxes, hymns that appeased gods, letters that commanded armies. He wrote statements that condemned families to exile. He inscribed temple dedications that guaranteed lavish offerings. With each tablet, he questioned whether he served the gods or served power itself. One dusky afternoon, as shadows lengthened across the courtyard of the House of Tablets, Tammuz overheard two elders arguing behind closed doors. "Elder, if we record everything, then the divine will be diminished. Priests will be judged by history, and we will lose the mysteries that keep men fearful." Elder B. "But without writing, how will we remember? How will we learn from our mistakes? History without record is like a man without breath." Tammuz stood frozen. He knew which side he believed in, but he also saw the danger. If writing could expose corruption, it could also provoke violent backlash. That night, by the flicker of an oil lamp, he clutched the amulet and vowed, "I will become the scribe who writes to free the world from forgetting. I will give voice to the unheard. But I will also guard against the hunger for power that words can sow." His resolve crystallized when Nindinger presented the class with a new assignment: to inscribe the king's achievements onto a grand commemorative stele. Tammuz recognized the signs for victory, glory, and supremacy. But he also saw unspoken shadows between the lines: the suffering of conquered peoples left unmentioned, the deaths of the poor omitted, the whispers of dissent erased. When his turn came, he raised his stylus with trembling hand, then carved, imperceptibly to any but himself, a tiny wedge for justice alongside the word victory. He hesitated, heart pounding as though he had committed a sacrilege. But the mark was there, hidden in plain sight. Before dawn, under a sky pregnant with promise, Tammuz dreamed again of the house of clay. The walls shifted, revealing a door carved with the shapes of all known signs: life, death, love, tyranny. A voice called from beyond: "You have tasted the power of words. But there is a deeper script yet unwritten. Follow the river of memory to the place where history was born, and you will learn how to weave truth from myth." He awoke with clay still clinging to his fingertips, and knew that the time had come to leave Uar behind. His journey would lead him beyond the city's gates, into the uncharted wilds where the first stories were whispered by tremulous reeds and thunderous storms. There, he would face his greatest trials, and discover whether he could master writing itself or be mastered by it. Dawn rose pale over the mist-laden marshes that stretched like a silver sea beyond Uar's city walls. Tammuz left before sunrise, clutching his amulet and the small bundle of provisions Nindinger had pressed into his hand. Anata stood at the gate, eyes bright with both pride and worry. "May the river's secrets guide you," she whispered. "Return with clay still in your veins." He offered a cautious smile, then slipped into the reeds. The world closed behind him in a rush of whispering fronds and dripping dew. Here, the air tasted of brine and promise. Every crackle of reed underfoot sounded like a chorus of unseen voices. His first trial was simple and deadly. A narrow channel opened before him, its waters black as obsidian. Across the channel lay a solitary bald cypress, its roots tangled like tentacles. According to the whispered maps of Eridu's priests, he had only to wade the channel, cut a single tuft of moss from that tree, and return before sunset. This moss, they said, was the key ingredient for Inanna's libations. But the reeds did not part willingly. Each step was a struggle, ankles sucked beneath the surface, currents tugging at his robes. Shadows moved in the water, slender shapes that darted just beyond reach. He dared not think of crocodiles. Instead, he whispered the signs for water and safety into the wind. Inuki. The chant steadied his pulse, though the currents only grew stronger. Midway across, the murmur deepened into a roar. A sudden whirlpool spun around the cypress, pulling stray branches into its vortex. The world tilted, and Tammuz nearly lost his balance. He recalled the legend of the water snake god, whose domain lay beneath these reeds. To insult the waters was to invite drowning. He bowed his head, pressed his hand to his amulet, and whispered a new sign: "Respect, Kian." The whirlpool stilled. The reeds parted like curtains, and he waded to the tree's gnarled roots. He knelt, careful not to disturb the underwater roots that might ensnare him. Gently he peeled the emerald moss, planting his stylus blade into the tree's bark as ritual, an offering of ink to the gods of the deep. As he rose, a single branch cracked. He froze, expecting wrath. Instead, a shaft of sunrise pierced the canopy, illuminating the moss in a halo of gold. The waters calmed. With his prize gathered, Tammuz retraced his path, emerging from the reeds at noon with lungs heaving but spirit alight. By mid-afternoon he reached the Silver Lighthouse, a solitary beacon built on an island in the river Euphrates. Though it bore the name, the structure was neither silver nor a lighthouse in any mortal sense. It was a white stone tower, a watchpoint for the river road merchants, and at its apex perched a great bowl of polished bronze, meant to catch moonlight and guide nocturnal vessels. Here, his task was political rather than physical. The keeper of the tower, an official named Isaidagon, demanded that he copy perfectly a royal dispatch from King Shulgi, then decipher its hidden phrase, an acrostic that would reveal a planned tribute to the Temple of Nana. Any error would mean false tribute or worse, suspicion of disloyalty. Tammuz ascended the winding stairs in the heat of midday, each step echoing with his doubts. He entered a circular chamber hung with tapestries depicting kings and their victories. A single window framed the river's glimmer. Isaidagon, draped in linen stained with oil, slid the dispatch across a marble table and pointed to the cuneiform. To the governors of the southern provinces, may the barley flow like silver waves. May the flocks multiply under your care. The scribe's flourish at the bottom concealed the acrostic. The first wedge of each line spelled Invention, signaling a special offering. Tammuz dipped his stylus in ink, made from burnt reeds and beeswax. His hand trembled as he pressed each wedge into a fresh tablet. One slip, a mirror of his first reed mold scratches, would be ruin. He chanted under his breath, "Precision, Nigi." Each stroke found its form. When he finished, Isaidagon checked every character, then studied Tammuz's face for signs of deception. Finding none, he nodded. "Lesson 2, Isaidagon said, voice low. "To write is to wield power, but to read between lines is to possess it." He stamped the tablet with a seal of blue-green feldspar. Tammuz realized that knowledge could be bartered like silver, currency more valuable than gold. When night fell, Tammuz boarded a skiff bound for Eridu, the ancient city where the first temple of Enki and the first oracle were said to reside beneath the riverbed. According to legend, one must descend into the subterranean shrine and navigate a labyrinth of flooded corridors, guided only by a thread of reed fiber and the oracle's riddles. Success meant wisdom, failure, eternal submersion. The journey took him across moonlit waters, past temples whose domes gleamed like mother of pearl. He arrived at an alcove carved from living rock, where inscriptions warned trespassers of the gods' tests. Only the truthful may drink from the spring of knowing. Only the brave may hear the silent voice. Clutching his amulet, he stepped into knee-deep water. The reed thread, gift of Anitu, slipped between his fingers like a lifeline to the world above. The corridors curved and forked, walls lined with bas-reliefs of fish people and vessels brimming with stars. Every echo sounded like the chant of spirits. At the first fork, a disembodied voice whispered, "What walks without legs, yet weeps when you speak its name?" Tammuz paused. His heart thundered. He recalled the story of the rain god's tears. He answered, "Cloud." The corridor ahead flooded with gentle light. The water receded. Further on, a second voice rasped, "I bind the living, yet hold no hands. I chase the future, yet carry the past. What am I?" He thought of his stylus imprinting signs, of stories carried on clay. He replied, "Memory." A distant chamber opened, revealing a spring of crystalline water. The final test awaited. He must drink, then speak a truth so personal that no word written could capture it. He knelt, quaffed the water, and felt visions swirl. His mother's laughter, the crack of the cypress branch, the seal of Isaidagon, the future's half-written script. He spoke, voice quavering. "I fear that writing will bind us more tightly than freedom. I fear I will become a jailer of my own words." Silence. Then the water glowed. The reed thread lifted, guiding him back. When he emerged, breathless, into the night air, he carried a new symbol cut from the cavern wall. The sign for truth, Sukkah. It was faintly glowing, as though etched by moonlight itself. Each trial reshaped Tammuz. The moss taught him humility before nature. The cipher revealed the politics of words. The oracle's gauntlet forced him to confront his deepest doubts. He began to see writing not just as a record, but as a living force, one that could nurture or corrupt, heal or harm. Back in UR, he inscribed the sign for trial, JS, beside each of his new tablets, marking them as rites of passage. He confided in Anitu, who pressed her hand to his arm and urged him onward. Neen Dinger, however, watched with a more somber gaze, an unspoken warning in her eyes. It was during the feast of the new year, when the city pulsed with music and incense, that Tammuz's true mentor emerged. In the courtyard of the House of Tablets, an elder figure draped in lapis robes appeared. Enki Bani, the high scribe who claimed descent from the god of wisdom himself. His beard was white as river foam, his eyes sharp as obsidian. Enki Bani summoned Tammuz to his side and offered him a gift, a stylus of meteoric iron. its tip shaped like the river snake entwined around a reed. The iron had fallen from the sky, enshrining the blessing of the heavens into the scribe's hand. With this, Enki Bani intoned, "You may carve your own destiny. But remember, every word you write binds a fate. Choose wisely." Under that starlit sky, Tammuz accepted the stylus. He felt its cold weight anchor him to purpose. The road ahead would be fraught with moral and mystical perils, and only by mastering both clay and conscience could he survive. In the days that followed the feast of the new year, Tammuz's renown grew. Whispers spread through Uar's corridors. The shepherd's son who had braved the marsh, cracked royal ciphers, and deciphered the oracle's riddles. His meteoric iron stylus became the symbol of his ascent. But with every step up the ziggurat of acclaim, a darker temptation tightened its grip on his heart. One evening, summoned to the Hall of Masks, a chamber reserved for elite initiates, Tammuz found himself surrounded by figures draped in obsidian veils, their ceramic masks carved in the likenesses of gods. At its center sat Isidagon, Nindinger, Anitu, and Enki Bani, their eyes shining through slits as they appraised him. Enki Bani proffered a small, black clay mirror, polished until it gleamed like oil. "Behold," he intoned, "the reflection of your soul." Tammuz took the mirror with trembling hands. In its surface he saw himself, yet not as he was. His eyes glowed with righteous fire. His hands dripped ink like blood. Behind him rose a vast stele carved with his own likeness, monumental as a mountain, its base inscribed with the laws he might one day decree. The mirror trembled, and he heard a chorus of voices chanting, "Write history in your own image. Bind the narrative to your will." He recoiled, the mirror's surface rippling like disturbed water. It was then he felt it, the intoxicating pulse of possibility. With a single wedge, he could condemn a rival scribe. With a single line, he could rewrite the record of a defeated king. With a single stroke, he could exalt his own name beyond all measure. Across the hall, Anitu reached for his hand, her fingers brushing clay dust from his wrist. "Remember who you are," she whispered. "Remember the boy by the Tigris, tracing spirals in the silt." Her words anchored him. The mirage shattered, the chorus faded, yet the dread lingered. Did he have the strength to refuse the sweetness of omnipotence? Soon thereafter, Tammuz was presented with his greatest moral dilemma. King Shulgi, pleased by the young scribe's brilliance, commissioned him to craft a new edict, one that would bind the indebted peasantry of Umma to the grain banks of Uar for a generation. The harvest had failed. Famine spread. The king sought to secure food supplies, but the price was crushing. Tammuz retreated to his chamber, the amulet heavy against his chest. He wrote the first draft easily enough. Precise, elegant wedges that guaranteed tribute, exemption from lawsuit, and indefinite service. Yet each line felt like a noose tightening around the necks of innocents. That night, he dreamt again of the black clay mirror. This time, the reflection wore a crown of ears, ears to hear the people's suffering, yet a tongue that glorified the king's power. A single tear traced a path down his cheek in the mirror, carving a river of ink. He awoke resolved. At dawn, he approached Enki Bani with trembling courage. "My master," he said, voice low, "this edict will crush the people. I cannot inscribe it as is." Enki Bani studied him with ancient calm. "You serve the king. You serve the people. A scribe must balance both. Rewrite the edict. Grant relief staggered over seasons. Let the people breathe between demands." It was the first time a superior had ever tempered royal will. Tammuz realized that power, when guided by compassion, could become the instrument of justice rather than oppression. He set stylus to clay and recrafted the edict. 5 years of tribute in 3 phases, communal loans to sustain the poorest, and royal pardons for debts incurred before the last harvest. When presented, the king paused, then approved with a nod. In that moment, Tammuz tasted the true power of writing, not domination, but the delicate forging of compromise between throne and hearth. Word of Tammuz's tempered edict and his gift of the iron stylus stirred envy among the older scribes. They branded him a usurper, a threat to their long-held privileges. A clandestine faction formed in the bowels of the House of Tablets, calling themselves the Silent Wedge. They believed that power belonged only to those steeped in ink and age, that a peasant's son had no claim to the sacred mysteries of writing. One dusk, Tammuz overheard their oath in a dim corridor. "We shall break his stylus, scatter his tablets, and return history to the rightful guardians, without mercy, without remorse." Chills ran down his spine. These were not the respectful elders who tested him. They were assassins of reputation and memory. Their leader, Dumuzali, was a veteran scribe whose eyes glinted like chipped flint. He had taught at Tammuz's side, once, until ambition had driven him into bitterness. The conspiracy moved swiftly. Late one night, as Tammuz returned from a vigil at the ziggurat of Inanna, he found his chamber door forced open. Clay tablets lay broken on the floor, ink pools dried into crusted geodes. His meteoric iron stylus, his talisman, was gone. Panic seized him. He cradled the shards of a crushed tablet, his most precious work, the record of his first trial, and felt despair. Without his stylus, his gift felt severed. He feared the elimination of his name from memory, the erasure of his very existence. But then he remembered the amulet's silent promise: protection not by might, but by purpose. He gathered the clay fragments, tucked them into his tunic, and slipped into the moonlit streets. There, he found Anitu waiting in the shadows. "They came for you," she hissed. "I saw Dumuzali. He claimed the stylus for himself." Tammuz pressed the clay to his heart. "They cannot destroy what I carry within." He pressed a shard between his palm and invoked the sign for resilience, Kias. The clay warmed, and he felt the faint pulse of the oracle's glow. The next morning, Tammuz was summoned before the Council of Scribes. He feared a show trial, accusations of negligence, sabotage, even treason. But instead, the council's verdict was swift. He was stripped of his rank and exiled from the House of Tablets for one lunar cycle. Dumuzali sneered as Tammuz was led away. "Go carve memories in the mud," he spat. "You are no scribe, but a charlatan." Tammuz descended from the ziggurat like a fallen star, his heart bruised but unbowed. Exile would be his final trial, a time to prove that writing was more than titles and tools, that true scribing was sustained by conviction, not ceremony. For the next 29 nights, Tammuz wandered the desert beyond Uar's walls. He carried only clay shards and the amulet. He slept under uncounted constellations, waking each dawn to the silence of sand. With his hands he molded new tablets, fragments of prayers, poems, pleas for mercy, any words that might otherwise vanish. He left these clay offerings at abandoned shrines, at the bones of animals bleached by sun, at the footprints of nomads who passed without leaving a trace. In this desert of forgotten names, he learned that writing was not a luxury of courts, but the heartbeat of memory itself. Each tablet he left was a whisper against the void, a stand against oblivion. On the 30th night, beneath a moon broader than any he had seen, he came upon a well he had never charted on any map. The locals called it the Well of Echoes, a source of water that sang back every word spoken above it. Emboldened by desperation, he knelt and spoke. "I am Tammuz, son of Dumuzi. I wandered these sands to find my purpose." The water trembled, then returned. "I am memory, shaped by story. I am the clay in your hand. You are more than scribe. You are the witness of worlds." The well's surface glowed, revealing ripples that became images, the cypress and the whirlpool, the cipher at the silver lighthouse, the oracle's riddles, Isidagon's seal, the broken tablets, the march of emaciated peasants, Anitu's gentle smile, and at last, a vast clay stele stretching beyond the horizon, inscribed with signs unknown even to Enkibani. As the vision faded, Tammuz wept. He realized his exile had not diminished him. It had refined his purpose. He had learned to write not for the king, nor for fame, nor for power, but for the silent voices of the lost and the voiceless. His destiny was not merely to inscribe history, but to invent history as an act of compassion and truth. Dawn broke pink and solemn over the desert. Tammuz stood, renewed, and turned toward Uar's distant skyline. In his mind thrummed the well's last message. "When you return, carry the first tablet of true history, one that sings of all lives, not just the mighty." He packed the remaining clay upon his shoulder and set off, ready to face the gatekeepers once more. His exile was over. The House of Tablets awaited his testimony. He would bring back not only his stylus, but also the revelation that writing was a sacred covenant, a promise between writer and world. A fortnight after Tammuz's return from exile, the city of Ur stood poised on the brink of renewal. The rebalanced edict had spared the people from ruin, and festivals of thanks echoed through temple courts. Yet beneath the jubilant chants lurked an ancient dread. The land's wellsprings still trembled with the memory of drought, and the sky's warmth carried the promise of famine. One night, as incense spiraled upward in the shrine of Nana, Anitu found Tammuz kneeling before the silver-lipped statue of the moon god. His fingers brushed the cold alabaster, tracing the god's half-closed eyes. "They whisper of an upheaval," he murmured. "A sickness not of flesh, but of forgetting." Anitu drew close, voice low. "I have heard it too. The elders speak of a prophecy, that the forest of memory will burn unless one dares to descend into the realm of Namtar, the god of death and oblivion, and carve out a shard of true history from his eternal scripts." Tammuz's heart thundered. The realm of Namtar lay beyond mortal reach, hidden beneath the layers of the earth and the corridors of time itself. Only once before had an oracle spoken of its gates. In a dream of cataract eyes, the high priestess of Eridu had quoted the final tablet of Enki. "There is a door in the house of clay that opens only when all clay has turned to dust. Beyond it lies the halls of unmaking, where the scribe of oblivion sits at the cosmic ledger. His quill erases worlds." To even approach that realm was madness. To enter was to court annihilation, of body, of mind, and of name. Yet Tammuz's hand pressed to his chest where the lapis amulet lay. He felt its steady pulse, as if the spirit of memory itself beckoned him onward. The following dawn, he stood before the council of scribes, robes stained with clay, eyes alight with resolve. Enki Bani, flanked by 50 elders, raised a hand of blessing and warning. "You have proven yourself to clay and to conscience," the high scribe intoned. "Yet the greatest trial remains. You must venture into the underworld of forgetting and retrieve the tablet of true names. Without it, our records cannot withstand the final drought of memory that approaches." A hush fell. The tablet of true names was said to hold every living soul's secret designation, the syllables spoken before birth, unknown even to gods. If erased from that tablet, a being ceased to exist in story or thought. To reclaim, it would mean wresting control of destiny itself. Tammuz inclined his head. "I accept this trial, even if the price is my own name." That evening, by the light of 10,000 oil lamps, the council performed the ritual of unmaking at the steps of Ikur, the great moon temple. They shaped a colossal clay door, pillars entwined with serpent motifs, lintel carved with the signs Sukkah, truth, and Laos, oblivion. As chanting priests intoned the invocations, the door shimmered, then slid into the temple floor, revealing a spiraling staircase hewn from dark basalt. Anitu pressed a final clay tablet into Tammuz's palm, the tablet of dispatch, inscribed with the spells of safe passage and return. "Return with the true names," she whispered, tears glinting in torchlight. "Or not at all." Tammuz chanted the protective signs, life, memory, and courage. He kissed the amulet, stepped onto the first stair, and the clay door rumbled shut above him. The lamps flickered. The air grew acrid, tasting of ash and ancient sorrow. The staircase descended for leagues. Each step throbbed like the heartbeat of the earth. Finally, Tammuz emerged into a cavern lit by a pale phosphorescence. Before him lay the river of lost echoes, a shimmering torrent whose waters reflected only those words ever forgotten by mortals. He remembered the old woman's prophecy, death of forgetting. Here it was made manifest. Every name ever unspoken, every story untold, flowed in that river. Its current carried the laments of vanished cities, the songs of children never born, the final breaths of heroes erased by time. To cross it, Tammuz must navigate a rickety reed raft lashed together with sinew. He strapped the meteoric stylus to his belt and placed the tablet of dispatch within a clay jar sealed with a prayer. With steady hands, he propelled the raft into the silent flood. Halfway across, the water began to murmur, at first faint, then loud. Whispers of voices he barely recognized. a distant melody of harvest hymns, a lover's vow long since broken, the laughter of his sister Aisha when she was still a child, the pain of every debt unpaid, every promise forgotten. The raft pitched. Tammuz clutched the reed oar, chanting the sign for resilience. Yet a single slip of memory might pull him beneath the surface into uncharted oblivion. He closed his eyes, focused on the amulet's steady heartbeat, and steered by intuition alone. At the far shore, the murmurs ceased. Tammuz set foot on slick black sand and felt the weight of eons shift on his shoulders. Ahead stood the next threshold, a columned gate carved with the visage of Namtar himself, eyes hollow, mouth twisted in a silent scream. Beyond the gate sprawled the chamber of unmaking, a vaulted hall of basalt and bone. Thousands of reed tablets floated in midair, each a fragment of history unrecorded, waiting to be claimed or destroyed. At the far end, in dim torchlight, sat the primordial scribe atop a dais of obsidian. His hands, long and spidery, hovered over a massive stone tablet, the tablet of true names, its surface inscribed with countless names that shimmered like living glyphs. His face was hidden beneath a mantle of clay dust. Only his mouth was visible, whispering fragments of stories as he erased them. Gilgamesh of Uruk, Cadmus of Thebes, Inanna, firstborn of heaven. All shall fade. The air stank of unspoken loss. To speak the names aloud would free them. To write them back onto clay would restore their power. But misstep, and the scribe's quill might cross out Tammuz's own name, condemning him to eternal obscurity. Tammuz stepped forward, voice echoing in the vaulted hall. By the power of memory and the covenant of clay, I challenge you, scribe of oblivion, to a contest of names. The primordial scribe halted his chant. In a voice like grinding stone, he hissed, "Name me your mother's secret name, the one spoken before she was called mother." Tammuz paused, mind racing. Memories flickered, his mother's lullabies, whispered beneath the reed roof when he was an infant. He felt her breath on his cheek, the softness of her voice. He recalled the secret word of intimacy she had once murmured when telling him stories of lost gods. He spoke it, Sapir, soft voice. The scribe recoiled, mouth open in silent fury. His quill carved a jagged line through the floating tablet, and 1,000 names writhed like snakes. But the tablet of true names trembled in the air, its glow intensifying. The scribe hissed another command. "Name me the firstborn language of humankind, the tongue before Sumerian, before Akkadian, before any clay was shaped." Tammuz shuddered. He recalled the twilight of dreams, when the reed swamp's frogs croaked in harmony, when the wind hummed through canyons, when thought and sound were indistinguishable. He closed his eyes and voiced the primordial tongue, a sequence of guttural, whispered tones, Kalakar, the ancient language of breath. The scribe shrieked, claws scraping the basalt floor. The floating tablets shattered like brittle pottery, fragments clattered across the hall. The tablet of true names descended to Tammuz's outstretched hands, its surface flickering with countless shimmering signs. Yet the scribe was not defeated. He rose, spectral and terrible, and advanced upon Tammuz, quill raised to cross out his true name. Time slowed. The scribe's wings of clay unfurled behind him, dust falling like snow. Tammuz gripped his meteoric iron stylus. He knew that to vanquish the scribe, he must risk his own essence. In one swift motion, he hurled the stylus like a spear. It struck the scribe's quill, shattering it into bone-white splinters. The hall quaked. The chamber's walls groaned. The scribe howled as his power unraveled, quill shards raining like icicles. But as the quill broke, so too did Tammuz's stylus. The meteoric iron snapped, tip and shaft clinking onto the basalt floor. For a heartbeat, Tammuz feared he had lost the final key. But then the tablet of true names glowed, and the fractured stylus reformed within his hand, as if fused by the will of memory itself. The primordial scribe lunged, but could not touch him. The tablet of true names hovered between them, casting light that banished shadows. Tammuz raised the tablet and spoke, voice ringing with authority. "By the covenant of clay, I restore the names unmade. By the breath of true memory, I bind the scribe of oblivion to the fate he sought to impose." He pressed the tablet's edge against the dais. Runes blazed. The scribe's form convulsed. then unraveled like dust in a cyclone. His voice echoed one last lament. Without names, all is nothing. And then the hall was silent. The floating tablets dissolved, and only Tammuz stood, clutching the tablet of true names. In the aftermath, the cavern breathed anew. Light seeped through unseen fissures. The river of lost echoes shimmered and settled into its channel. Tammuz approached the dais, knelt before the massive stone tablet now unguarded. He placed the tablet of true names beside it, and the two tablets fused, names from the cosmic ledger aligning with their echoes in the mortal world. As he traced the signs with his finger, visions flooded his mind. The rise and fall of Ur's first kings, in honest detail, their triumphs and their cruelties. The silent tears of war widows, inscribed beside the speeches of conquering generals. The hidden names of unrecorded heroes, the midwife who saved 1,000 lives, the poet who chronicled a single sunset, the whispered titles of forgotten deities, whose power lingered in broken reeds and hidden springs. He realized that history was not a ledger of the powerful, but a tapestry woven from every thread of existence, light and shadow, triumph and despair. To invent history was to honor all those threads. As dawn's first rays pierced the cavern, the fused tablet disintegrated into motes of light, rising like sparks into the air, each mote a restored name, a rekindled memory, destined to drift into the world above. Tammuz gathered the tablet of dispatch, the only clay artifact that remained whole, and retraced his steps upward. With each stair climbed, he felt the weight of the tablet of true names lift from his shoulders, replaced by a luminous lightness. When Tammuz emerged into the courtyard of Ekor, the clay door ground back into place as though it had never been. Anitu and Neendinger were waiting, faces pale with anxiety. At his approach, tears blossomed in their eyes. He held up the tablet of dispatch. Its seals were intact. In silence, he pronounced the protective signs, and from the tablet's surface, a soft glow pulsed. In that glow, the names of every exile, every slave, every forgotten child from Ur and beyond, flickered alive. The council of scribes, gathered again beneath the ziggurat stair, fell silent as Tammuz stepped forward. Enkibani lifted a hand in benediction. "You have gone where no scribe dared tread," he proclaimed. "You have wrested history from oblivion and bound the world's memory with compassion. From this day forth, let every name be honored, every story told." Tammuz placed the tablet of dispatch upon the sacrificial altar. He spoke the final invocation. "May the clay of memory never harden into forgetting. May the quill of truth never dull. May the song of history be sung by all who walk beneath the stars." A chorus of voices joined, priests, scribes, citizens, chanting the signs for life and memory. The air trembled, as though the world itself exhaled in relief. Though the greatest trial had been overcome, Tammuz knew his journey was not complete. The tablet of true names existed now only as living memory, scattered across hearts and minds. But whispers reached him of new threats, rival kingdoms seeking to harness the power of clay for conquest, secret cabals determined to weaponize false histories, and the ever-present danger that even a hero's deeds could be swallowed by time. Yet Tammuz felt no fear. He carried within him the echoes of every life he had reclaimed, the pulse of every story he had honored. In his hand burned the promise of true history, an invention not of kings, but of all who dare to speak and be remembered. And so, under the watchful moon of Nana, the shepherd's son turned scribe, now champion of memory, prepared to forge the next scrolls of destiny, knowing that as long as clay remains soft, history remains alive. Tammuz departed Ur the next morning under a sky woven from rose and gold. The city's dust clung to his robes, but his heart was light with triumph. He traveled southward, retracing the dusty caravansary that had first brought him from Larsa. Each step carried echoes of his trials. The hush of the marshes, the ciphered dispatches, the oracle's riddles, the echoing halls of oblivion. His companion on the road was Anitu, her laughter a bright thread against the whispering winds. Together they passed date palms heavy with fruit and fields where farmers turned the earth with wooden plows. Children ran beside their camels, tossing handfuls of clay at one another in imitation of scribes. At each oasis, Tammuz shared small morsels from the tablet of dispatch, words of hope he had inscribed there, blessing the thirsty wells with signs for life and renewal, Namu. At night, they lay beneath constellations. Anitu would trace the stars with her finger, weaving them into ancient myths, while Tammuz recited the names he had rescued from oblivion. Some names soared like eagles, heroes, poets, seers, while others hummed like crickets in summer grass. Farmers whose fields had failed, mothers who had lost children, artisans whose songs were never sung. Yet in his voice, each name found its music once more. When they neared Larsa's reed huts at the forest's edge, a windstorm rose, sending sand swirling like ghostly dancers. Tammuz pressed the amulet to his chest. He felt the tablet's final invocation pulsing through him, a promise that memory could endure even the fiercest wind, even the harshest drought. As dawn broke pale over Larsa, Tammuz and Anitu entered his family's courtyard. His mother stood by the reed gate, her shawl drawn tight around her shoulders, eyes scanning the horizon. At the sight of him, she dropped to her knees, mud brick dust rising around her like a benediction. "Is it you, my son?" she cried, voice trembling. Tammuz knelt and embraced her, feeling the warmth of home and the weight of all he had become. He introduced Anitu, whose own eyes glistened with tears of relief. His father and sister Aisha appeared, astonished by the meteoric streak stylus pinned to his tunic and the clay dust in his hair. They led him inside the reed hut, where his mother offered milk and barley bread. He drank deeply, savoring the simple flavors of hearth and harvest. Yet even in that comfort, he felt the tremor of change. He was no longer the same boy who had traced spirals in the silt. He was a scribe of destiny, a guardian of memory, bearer of names. Over the meal, he recounted the first trials, the moss of the cypress, the cryptic cipher on the silver lighthouse, the riddles of the oracle, the hall of masks, the edict of mercy, his exile, the well of echoes, and the descent into the underworld to reclaim the tablet of true names. His family listened in rapt silence, eyes wide with wonder. When he spoke of the primordial scribe and the final contest of names, his mother reached across the table, touching his hand. "You have walked among gods and shadows," she whispered, "yet you carry our voices within you. Never forget the hearth from which your strength was kindled." Thomas nodded, heart full. He realized in that moment that the greatest magic was not found in ziggurats or clay tablets, but in the simple bond of shared story. His journey had been epic, but it was woven from ordinary threads: a mother's lullaby, a sister's laughter, a friend's steadfast loyalty. That afternoon, Tammuz climbed the gentle rise overlooking Larsa's fields. He stood where the flock had once grazed, gazing at the bridges spanning the canals and the reed boats drifting like sleeping swans. He held the shattered shards of his original trials, each fragment inscribed with the sign for trial. He let them fall into the water, watching as the clay dissolved and the signs drifted away. As he did so, he reflected on what each trial had taught him: humility before nature. The moss of the cypress had shown him that power over the world is an illusion. True strength lies in respect and balance. Discernment of language. The silver lighthouse cipher revealed that words shape reality. To read between lines is to glimpse truths hidden by power. Confrontation with fear. The oracle's labyrinth had forced him to face his deepest doubts, that writing might bind more than liberate. Guardianship of compassion. The edict test taught him that justice demands empathy. Ruling hearts is more precious than ruling lands. Resilience in exile. Wandering the desert proved that identity persists beyond titles and tools. Memory is the everlasting home. Mastery of memory. The Well of Echoes and the Primordial Scribe's challenge affirmed that history must honor every voice, not just the mighty. He realized that his quest had not ended with victory, but had only begun. The fragments of clay he had released into the canals would nourish the reeds. The names he had restored would ripple through time. Yet the world still teetered on the brink of forgetting. The drought of memory threatened kingdoms as surely as drought of rain threatened crops. He pondered the nature of history itself, a living river that spirals between truth and myth, nourished by storytellers but poisoned by silence. He understood that to invent history was not to erect monuments, but to kindle countless hearth fires of remembrance, each story a spark against oblivion. Word of Tammuz's journey spread beyond Larsa, carried by reed messengers to Eridu, Kish, Nippur, and beyond. Scribes across the land adopted his ritual of naming, inscribing at each tablet's end a dedication to the forgotten, a single line honoring the humblest individuals whose lives shaped the world in invisible ways. Temples instituted days of remembrance, when citizens offered clay tablets to honor ancestors lost to famine, war, or neglect. In marketplaces, children practiced cuneiform scribbles in the dust, learning not only symbols for trade but symbols of empathy, the signs for compassion and solidarity, ses and memory itself. Even rival courts took heed. King Shulgi commissioned a great archive in Uar, featuring 2 wings, one for royal edicts, the other for the voices of common folk, songs, laments, local legends. Where once history had been a monologue, it became a chorus. Yet questions remained unanswered. The silent wedge, Dumuziali and his faction had dispersed into the desert. Rumors whispered they were forming anew in the shadows. Would they seek vengeance on Tammuz or the scribal order? The hidden tablet. Fragments of the primordial scribe's fallen tablets were said to have drifted back into the river of lost echoes. Might they be recovered by those who would misuse them? The future of writing. As reed styluses gave way to bronze, as clay tablets gave way to parchment, what new trials would the scribe of tomorrow face? Tammuz understood that every ending was but the edge of a new beginning. He had conquered oblivion, but the currents of time would never still. His task was to keep pace with those currents, guiding their flow with compassion and truth. As evening fell, Tammuz returned to the banks of the Tigris, where the first trials had begun. He knelt and let the water lap against his sandals, tracing spirals in the mud once more, just as he had when he was a boy. But now, each spiral carried meaning, the spiral of life, of story, of memory turning inward and then outward, binding all things together. He spoke into the dusk. Memory is the hearth of the human soul. Without it, we wander nameless, ghost-like through the world. With it, we become more than clay and breath. We become time's weavers, crafting tapestries that endure beyond our mortal span. He paused, listening as the river murmured in reply, carrying fragments of his first words on its currents. He knew that voices he had never met, farmers, mothers, artisans, now sang his name in their own tongues, and he in turn carried theirs. The covenant between scribe and world was sacred, each name a spark against the darkness, each story a beacon for all who follow. He rose, shoulders squared against the cool night wind. Above, the stars blinked in solemn witness. In Lil's counsel, in Anna's gaze, Nana's pale smile. Tomorrow, he would return to Uar and continue his work. But tonight, he was simply a man by the river, cradling the dawn of history in his hands. The sun did not rise over Sumer the same way after Tammuz's odyssey. In the soft glow of dawn that followed his return, every reed seemed to whisper names anew. Every clay tablet gleamed with possibility. Yet the grandest revelation lay not in temples or scrolls, but in the quiet truth that history is not merely observed, but co-created. A living tapestry woven from the threads of every soul. At the heart of Tammuz's journey lay a simple, profound pact, the scribe's covenant with the world. He did not claim dominion over memory, but stewardship. Writing, he learned, was not the conquest of time, but the gentle guiding of it. Each sign he pressed into clay was a promise, that lives would not vanish like wind on water, that voices would not be swallowed by shadows, that the small and large, the joyous and the tragic, would share equal standing in the song of humanity. In our own lives, we too are scribes of memory. Through the stories we tell, the photographs we take, the traditions we honor, we choose which voices to amplify and which to silence. Like Tammuz, we navigate currents of power and passion, of fear and hope. The measure of our legacy is not the monuments we erect, but the lives we touch and the names we ensure endure. Clay is humble, earth pressed by wind and water, but when shaped by intent and inscribed by the stylus, it becomes eternal. So too are our words, seemingly fragile, yet capable of outlasting empires. Tammuz's meteoric iron stylus symbolized that alchemy, the transformation of raw material into meaning. His breaking and reforging underscored a vital lesson. True power lies not in unyielding force, but in the resilience to bend and the courage to renew. When we speak or write, we hold a stylus of our own, a keyboard, a pen, a voice. We inscribe not only facts, but values, compassion, justice, empathy. We shape the clay of culture. Each act of storytelling, whether grand or intimate, carries the responsibility Tammuz embraced, to bind memory with kindness, to champion the forgotten, to stand against the erasure of truths. Tammuz's descent into the underworld of forgetting revealed the twin forces that shape history: creation and destruction, remembrance and oblivion. The primordial scribe embodied the lure of erasure, the seductive ease of denying inconvenient truths. Yet from that confrontation emerged a greater insight. Light shines only because of shadow. To value memory is to acknowledge that some stories wound as deeply as they heal. The wounds themselves become guides, reminding us that compassion is forged through understanding pain. In our age, we encounter our own underworlds, narratives that seek to rewrite facts, to silence dissent, to erase marginalized voices. Tammuz's victory echoes for us that true history is not dictated by power, but reclaimed by courage. We each stand at the threshold of oblivion, and the choice to speak or remain silent shapes the fate of collective memory. Though Tammuz returned home triumphant, he understood that history is an infinite scroll, ever unfurling, ever incomplete. No single scribe, no single era can capture its fullness. Every ending is but a new beginning. As long as clay remains pliant, as long as tongues can whisper and hands can carve, the story continues. This awareness frees us from the tyranny of perfection. It invites us to participate, to add our lines, to amend injustices, to share our truths. We need not be chosen prophets or ordained scribes. We are all custodians of the narrative. Our daily choices, what we remember, whom we honor, which stories we pass along, compose the living chronicle of humanity. Tammuz's final invocation, "May the clay of memory never harden into forgetting," resounds across millennia. It is both blessing and challenge. As readers, listeners, and fellow storytellers, we are called to reflect. Which names or stories will you carry forward? Whose voices will you give life to? Perhaps it is the neighbor whose kindness went unnoticed, the ancestor whose sacrifices were never recorded, the friend whose struggles remained unspoken. Perhaps it is the land itself, the whispering forests, the ancient rivers, the trembling skies, whose own memory we forget in our rush. Our task is to listen with intention, to witness with compassion, to inscribe with care. Thank you for accompanying Tammuz on his odyssey, a journey that began at the riverbank and ended in the subterranean halls of oblivion, only to return richer with wisdom. As you close this chapter of the Sumerian Saga, carry forward its lessons. Honor every life as an irreplaceable line in the epic. Speak truth with humility and courage. Guard memory against the currents of erasure. Share your reflections. Tell a story today of joy, of loss, of wonder that might otherwise go untold. In doing so, you become a living stylus, shaping the clay of tomorrow. In the end, history is not written by the victors alone, but by all who dare to speak and to remember. From the final verse of the Sumerian Saga, the invention of history, may your names be remembered and your stories endure.